I wanted to get the word out because it's an important subject. I mean, you've seen all the news about Make America Healthy Again, and it's this first seminar. We're going to have courses after this at Bartlett's store, but is just an open discussion and a little bit of a testimony on my part about what I've found out or what I've been through. I've basically made myself a little bit of a guinea pig because I was sick and tired. I'm 74, going on 75, and I was in tough shape, completely tough shape. Type 2 diabetes, the whole thing, suspected heart attack, high blood pressure, everything in my blood work was terrible. So I decided to find out some stuff and see if there's anything I could do about it without having to take another drug. I'm sick and tired of drugs. So I did a lot of research, and I found out that your body is self-healing and can take care of a lot of stuff where drugs are just a Band-Aid. So I just wanted to bring attention to this seminar, and I'll show on this video the invite, and I think it's a common interest, and it's really amazing what you can do. It sounds difficult. This isn't a diet thing, it's a health thing. And the story is that basically I was in tough shape in April, and now in November, I am totally off drugs. All my blood work is perfect, and I've turned it all around. And it was just by eating right, good, real, whole food, and not eating as often. Not a diet, just narrowing and the time you eat during the day. So you're not keeping your insulin up and causing insulin resistance. And I won't get in all the biology of the whole thing, but it's really amazing and it works. So stop on by on the 30th. It's, I believe, 7 to 8. I could be wrong. But the rest of this little video is a little bit about the problem and why we're talking about Make America Healthy Again, and why we're at the lake are talking about Make Yourself Healthy Again. And there's a lot of people like me, gray hairs, living up here, and even kids now really need to focus on this kind of stuff. So it's worth a 10-minute watch for this video that's to follow. And you can look out on the events page and the chat. Okay? All right. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you at the seminar. We have that slide that shows the obesity rate of North Dakota. Mm-hmm. The difference between 2012 and 2022 is alarming.
You see it on the street. You see it in the stores.
And it's not, and it's from old to very, very, very young. In fact, one of the doctors says that obesity has entered the womb.
You know, heart disease is the most common killer here in the U.S., worldwide, has been that way for 70 years now. I really came to recognize throughout my career as a heart surgeon over the past 20 years that we were failing. I am still a very busy heart surgeon. All the heart surgeons out there are very busy. If this has been our, I would put forth, main focus in medicine for the past 50 years, why isn't it getting better? Heart disease is a preventable disease. Wow. And it is due to the food that we eat. And even that is actually a controversial statement, you know, within the medical community. The real missing factor, what we should be focusing on, is inflammation, specifically inflammation in the blood vessels, and the role of what we call insulin resistance in the development of heart disease.
Today, I want to talk about the biggest myth of the national obesity epidemic. The biggest myth is that if you're obese or overweight, it's your fault. Today, 3/4 of American adults are obese or overweight, including 40% of American teenagers. Back when I was growing up, childhood obesity was almost unheard of. But you don't need statistics to know that something has changed. Look at the photographs of beaches or state fairs from the 1950s. Something has changed, and it isn't human nature. We haven't suddenly become lazy or gluttonous. What has changed is our food system, our diets, and the hormone-disrupting chemicals in our food, in our water, and our soil. We are being mass poisoned. Today, they tell you that you have obesity, like it was some kind of contagious disease. They treat it as if your body malfunctioned, and they give you a shot to control it. Or they make it about your lack of self-control. Well, that's an insult to anyone who has tried and struggled to lose weight. So what are they ignoring when they make it all about you and your body and your willpower and your character? And the solution is always a shot or a pill that somebody is going to cash in on. What they're ignoring is a food supply that's loaded with high fructose corn syrup and seed oils and hundreds of artificial additives and flavors and processed carbohydrates that don't exist in nature and that are banned in other countries. They ignore a skewed system of subsidies that make these unnatural, ultra-processed foods cheap. They ignore chemical contamination from pesticides that is wreaking havoc.
So the simple rule is eat real food. So what's real food? Well, food that came out of the ground or animals that ate food that came out of the ground. The problem is we all lead busy lives and we're looking for labor-saving devices because people don't even have time to cook. Most people, 33% of Americans don't even know how to cook.
For those who are watching and haven't been paying attention to this connection between big food, big pharma, and big government, why don't you lay it out for us?
This is the most important issue in the United States. We are systematically getting sicker, fatter, more depressed, more infertile because of food. 30% of teens now have prediabetes, which would have been unthinkable. 20% of teens have fatty liver disease. When you get to adults, 80% are obese or overweight.
One of the doctors says that obesity has entered the womb. Babies are being born like crazy amount bigger now.
I have a great-granddaughter just born at 13 pounds.
Yeah.
With issues that may go back to Ozempic with the mother.
Yeah. Why do you care so much?
I am a pediatrician. My job is to take care of children. Children are vulnerable in the same way. Minorities are vulnerable in the same way. Prisoners are vulnerable. Okay? They need a voice. My job is to give every kid a shot. Well, we now have neonatal obesity. We have babies being born, Israel, South Africa, Russia, United States, 4 separate studies showing that over the past 25 years, birth weight has gone up 200 grams, half a pound, in all 4 countries. And when you do DEXA scanning to look at body composition on those newborns, those 200 grams are all fat. We have a neonatal obesity. These kids did not get obese by dieting and exercising, by gluttony and sloth. They came out of the womb behind the 8 ball.
Any other hormone in the body that will cause fat storage unless it's working with insulin is what you're saying.
Yes. Yes, that's absolutely true. Indeed, Ben, in my lab, when we're growing fat cells, you cannot actually make them into fat cells until you've spiked insulin into the little culture broth, or what we call the culture medium. It cannot happen. You cannot signal a fat cell to store fat unless insulin is present.
In reality, behind the scenes, you got this really high insulin level. So I think that this is a time when we need to be educating our medical profession also, that we need to be looking at the insulin levels, because I'm finding that when I find these high insulin levels and then I chase that and I bring it down through methodologies, which we'll talk about in a second, now I'm making an impact on those patients who have heart disease. And all of a sudden I started noticing the patients were getting better when I bring their insulin levels down. And the way I brought it down, there's no magic pill to bring insulin levels down, as you know. There's no injection to bring your insulin level down. So that's when I got interested in fasting, because I realized, how am I going to bring this insulin level down? How? Oh my God. Okay. We're going to change the diet. Don't eat sugary things. Don't eat carbs. Don't eat simple stuff. But then as I started peeling that onion, I realized that it's not just that. It's also processed foods. It's also certain combinations of foods. And then I realized that, oh my God, we're eating too often as well. That's when I came and I said, you know what, there has to be one thing that'll help all of this, and that has to be fasting.
So when you look at the commonly held misconceptions, what do you see as being maybe the greatest misconception?
Yeah, so I think the greatest misconception ends up being this diet heart hypothesis that eating saturated fat raises your blood cholesterol level, and that raised blood cholesterol level is the primary driver of what's causing your heart disease. And ultimately, both parts of that hypothesis now, I would say, are wrong. You know, the relationship between how much fat and saturated fat is in our diet and our blood cholesterol levels is actually inconsistent. Some people, it's, more saturated fat means more cholesterol, other people not. So that's an inconsistent relationship. And then the second part of it, that increased blood cholesterol level in and of itself is a driver of heart disease, is clearly wrong as well.
I spent the first 20 years of my medical practice, in academia, basically, doing what they told me to do, the way I learned it. And I thought calories were the same. And I thought that, it didn't matter. And this is not what you do. And this is not how you take care of patients. You do prescriptions and you do procedures, and that's how you do it. It's a problem because the food industry has made the grocery store a minefield. So the simple rule is eat real food. So what's real food? Well, food that came out of the ground or animals that ate food that came out of the ground. The problem is we all lead busy lives and we're looking for labor-saving devices because people don't even have time to cook. Most people, 33% of Americans don't even know how to cook. We need food that is metabolically healthy for us, not metabolically detrimental. And the problem is that as soon as you put the added sugar in the food, you have made it metabolically detrimental. Now, the food industry will say, well, there are all these other good things in there, like vitamins and minerals. We fortify it, et cetera. So I'm here to tell you, toxin A plus antidote B still equals death. If it's not solving your mitochondrial dysfunction, what's the point? So you can't believe what the food industry is telling you. Mislabeling. 70% of all of the items in the American grocery store are misbranded or mislabeled.
In what way?
They say things that are not true.
Give me some examples.
Well, first of all, time they use the word healthy, okay, they say no added sugar. Okay, but in fact, they put in apple puree or raspberry puree or evaporated cane juice. There are 262 names for sugar, and the food industry uses all of them. Kellogg's has been sued for Raisin Bran. Okay, everyone thinks Raisin Bran, well, it's just raisins and bran. What color are the raisins in Raisin Bran?
I've never seen it.
Well, I mean, raisins are purple.
Yeah.
Purple brown.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, normally.
Well, the raisins in Raisin Bran are white. Why? If you take the raisins in Raisin Bran, that's supposed to be 11 grams of sugar, but on the side of the package, it says that one serving is 18 grams of sugar. Where'd the other 7 come from? It's the white, because they've all been dipped in a sugar solution to make them sweeter.
We're doomed. If a weight loss journey starts with the first step being a focus on low calorie, you're doomed because hunger will win. If the weight loss journey starts with low insulin, then you'll be successful because then the energy part will take care of itself. The way we can reconcile this is by simply conceding that what we eat matters more than how often. In fact, if I were to put a hierarchy, now I'm thinking about this in real time, I would say the composition of the foods matters more, and then the frequency matters second. Because if we had someone, Ben, whose snacking is they eat 2 hard-boiled eggs, well, you're fine. That's not going to be a problem. Or if your snack is, I don't know what else, a couple pieces of like these little sausage links that I like to keep around, these little Duke's sausage links or whatever they may be, that's not going to be a problem, or some bacon. That's going to be fine. But that's not what people snack on. People are snacking on these refined carbs, which is refined sugars and starches, and often, always, with refined oils.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you just explain angioplasty for those that are not familiar with it or maybe not be in the world of medicine? If you could just explain that.
Absolutely. So they come to me with chest pain, and I do an angiogram, which is putting the dye in the coronary arteries, and I find a blockage. So this blockage is preventing the blood from flowing into the heart muscle and supplying the muscle with the oxygen that it requires. So these blockages cause chest pain. And of course, when the blockage is 100%, you get a heart attack. And there the muscle is completely deprived of oxygen and dies. So what I do is I specialized in putting a fine wire into the coronary artery, the artery in the heart, and then I would slide a little, it's like a spring, into the artery and open up that artery and then leave the spring behind and then deflate the balloon, pull it out, and now the stent is left behind. So the stent is an angioplasty. Angioplasty means you're just basically fixing an artery or blockage. So that's what I would do. And Drew, the thing is that some patients did absolutely great, and others would come back with new blockages 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later. And I just couldn't understand it. And I looked at my traditional risk factors: smoking, high blood pressure, of course, diabetes. And then the list starts going blank. And I said, there must be more things that are causing this. And then that got me really curious. And then what happened is that I would have patients having heart attacks or angina, and then I would look at the risk factors and they don't have any. And I said, no, can't be. Why does this patient have hardening of the arteries? So then, this was about 20 years ago, I did a study here in my office where I took 100 patients in whom I did an angioplasty. And I said, how many of these people have diabetes? And I found that roughly a third of them had diabetes. But I did a glucose tolerance test on all of them in my office. It's a cheap test to run, so I did it. And I found that actually 80% of my patients had abnormal sugar metabolism. But yet only a third of them had a diagnosis of diabetes. So what happened to the other 1/3, or just over 1/3, is that they had an abnormality in their sugar metabolism. They didn't even know about it. And then I found that about 10% of them were actually diabetic, and they didn't even know they had diabetes. So there's a condition called glucose intolerance. That means your sugar level is a little high, but not high enough to make a diagnosis of diabetes. So I found that at least half of my patients in whom I didn't have a diagnosis of diabetes actually had slightly elevated sugar levels. And then that got me thinking that why is this happening? And right around that time, we were realizing that insulin levels are really high in these patients, and that type 2 diabetes is a case of hyperinsulinemia. So let me just explain that a little bit for the audience. So what happens is that in these patients, they develop high insulin levels, which keeps the sugar level down. So when you do the glucose tolerance, it doesn't look too bad. And you look at the blood test called a hemoglobin A1C, which is a test to see what your blood sugar has been doing over the last few weeks. They also stay nice and low. So, but the problem is the insulin level is so high. And I found that on my patients, that the insulin levels were so high for 10 years, 12 years before they become diabetic. So it's finally when the insulin just can't keep the sugar down, the sugar starts going up, you say, oh, now you have diabetes. But guess what? He's already had high insulin for by at least 10 to 12 years. And right then my curiosity really got there. I said, you know what? There's something going on here. And then as the more research came out and other researchers also came in, I realized that it's insulin resistance. And now, almost routinely, almost every patient gets an insulin level. Now, the problem is we were not doing insulin levels before. No one was measuring it. It was, if you go to your family doctor and say, I want to measure my insulin levels, he says, no, you don't need it. You just need a glucose tolerance test. and you do a glucose tolerance test, and it tells you nothing. It tells you that your sugars are okay, and you get a pat on the back and say, go home. But in reality, behind the scenes, you got this really high insulin level. So I think that this is a time when we need to be educating our medical professionals, so that we need to be looking at the insulin levels, because I'm finding that when I find these high insulin levels, and then I chase that and I bring it down through methodologies, which we'll talk about in a second, now I'm making an impact on those patients who have heart disease. And all of a sudden, I started noticing the patients were getting better when I bring their insulin levels down. And the way I brought it down, there's no magic pill to bring insulin levels down, as you know. There's no injection to bring your insulin level down. So that's when I got interested in fasting, because I realized, how am I going to bring this insulin level down? How am I going to? Okay, we're going to change the diet. Don't eat sugary things, don't eat carbs, don't eat simple stuff. But then as I started peeling that onion, I realized that it's not just that, it's also processed foods. It's also certain combinations of foods. And then I realized that, oh my God, we're eating too often as well. That's when I came and I said, you know what, there has to be one thing that'll help all of this, and that has to be fasting.
Yeah, I'm Thomas Seyfried, professor of biology here at Boston College, Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. And our research projects of recent, last 30 years perhaps, has been focusing on the genetics and biochemistry of cancer. All together, no mutations in some cancers, driver gene mutations in normal tissues, nuclear transfer experiments clearly indicate that cancer cannot be a genetic disease. And the reason why people think it is confirmation biased or hopeless ideology. And that seems to be locked into the entire system here. Confirmation bias and hopeless ideology maintains the idea that cancer is a genetic disease. And as the result of that, we have 1,700 people a day dying from a misunderstanding of what the nature of the disease is. We're now seeing that we're getting tremendous success in managing cancer using metabolic approaches. As I said, cancer tumor cells cannot survive without the sugar glucose or the amino acid glutamine, which are the fermentation fuels, nor can they use fatty acids or ketone bodies as an alternative. So the solution, I should say a solution to managing cancer, is to significantly lower the two fermentable fuels while elevating the body to an alternative fuel, the fatty acids and ketone bodies, which the tumor cells can't use. Thereby, we marginalize the cancer cells. Their survivability is significantly compromised. I have to be honest with you, to target glutamine is a little bit more difficult than reducing glucose. You can reduce glucose by water-only fasting and diets that lower the glucose ketone index, which we developed here at Boston College. It's an index of the ratio of glucose to glutamine. We can push that down. We have a calculator. The Keto Mojos and other meters can let the patient bring their own glucose down and elevate their ketones. One of our biggest papers for the transformation of cancer treatment in clinics is the Press Pulse Therapeutic Strategy, which we published here at Boston College with my colleagues Dominic D'Agostino, the late George Yu, and Dr. Joseph Maroon from the University of Pittsburgh. We put this together. It's called Press Pulse. We press glucose down and we pulse the glutamine while the body is in a state of nutritional ketosis. That will be the strategy for managing the majority of cancers when done correctly. The problem is the medical schools have not yet come to understand this. Unfortunately, many oncologists and physicians have never been trained to know that cancer is a metabolic disease. So we have to have the training of the physicians must happen, and we have to find a way to generate revenue using metabolic therapy in order to replace the revenue generation that's being done currently with these toxic poisons and radiations and these other things that we're treating people with. So it's going to be a slow transition. It's a paradigm shift of the greatest proportion, because it ultimately will be able to manage cancer and take the stigma of fear and mystery out of this disease, which is not nearly as complicated as has been made out to be. The tumor cells cannot survive without fermentation. The two fermentable fuels are glucose and glutamine. The tumor cells cannot adapt to fatty acids or ketone bodies in the absence of these two fuels. So once people come to know this, the strategies for managing cancer will be so much more effective, so much less toxic, and allow people to live far longer than is currently possible.
You know, heart disease is the most common killer here in the U.S., worldwide, has been that way for 70 years now. I really came to recognize throughout my career as a heart surgeon over the past 20 years that we were failing. I am still a very busy heart surgeon. All the heart surgeons out there are very busy. If this has been our, I would put forth, main focus in medicine for the past 50 years, why isn't it getting better? Heart disease is a preventable disease, and it is due to the food that we eat. And even that is actually a controversial statement, you know, within the medical community. The real missing factor, what we should be focusing on, is inflammation, specifically inflammation in the blood vessels, and the role of what we call insulin resistance in the development of heart disease.
Insulin resistance is a big deal. The majority of the population is insulin resistant, and if we don't understand it and it progresses, it can or will lead to diabetes, which is the leading cause of blindness, amputation, kidney failure, and a host of other problems.
Today we're going to talk about the 3-day water fast. Clean the brain, reset your energy. Let's get into some of the benefits and what happens during the 3 days. Let's get right into it. Benefits: improves immune function, repairs damage to cells, removes dysfunctional cells and pathogens, reduces neural inflammation, or basically things like prime glial cells, increase autophagy, breaks down cells and other pathogens in our system, decreases autoimmune disease, benefits gut flora or resets the gut flora, and increases DNA repair. Okay, so there's a lot of benefits to a 3-day fast.
That's nothing, just not eating. And how can I get better? Because they also don't understand that when you don't eat, you're bringing in a whole new biochemistry. They don't understand that. They don't know what fasting really does. But once they understand that fasting is not just fasting, it is a huge new biochemistry. It's a whole new metabolism that you're bringing in. And then you talk about that metabolism and now how you can get that flexibility in your metabolism. Now you got their attention. So I think it's been basically we need people like you and Mark and other people that can talk about this and educate people that no, fasting is not just fasting. It's not just a boring subject. There's so much science behind it.
I'm on record. I gained a lot of weight while I was a faculty member at UCSF. And every day at 4 p.m., I just ran out of gas. And so I ran across the street to get a large chocolate chip cookie. Okay, and that was without question the primary driver of my weight gain. Okay, it wasn't until I actually started doing the research on this and seeing that the kids felt better when we took the sugar out of their diet that I actually put 2 and 2 together for myself.
Now to the actual, what I've been doing for the last 20 days, little over 20 days. 20 days it's actually been 24 days. At the 20th day, I went and had some blood work done. And I'll put this on the screen so you can see it a little better. But, and I'll tell you about the results. But here, before I said I was going to do 40 days of eating 1 meal a day and a 23-hour fast, eating real food like from the garden and from organic proteins, chickens, eggs, pork, beef, bison, from a local rancher, farmer, dairyman. And I said I'd just do that for 40 days. I modified that after, seeing what Dr. Germanis had talked about, the value of a 3-day water fast. So what I did do was I did 7 days, 1 meal a day, fast 23. I did take a lot of water, and then I did add Redmond salt to the water for the minerals, that depletion. I didn't do a complete carnivore because of the vegetables, and they have some carbohydrates in it, but I didn't do any high starchy vegetables like potatoes. No eating out, no alcohol, no sugars, very, very low in carbs, only from the vegetables behind me, leafy vegetables, etc. We cooked it in a manner not to brown a lot of stuff, mostly sauteed. But 1 meal a day, 23-hour fast for 7 days, then a 3-day water fast, 72-hour water fast. 7 days, 1 meal a day, 23-hour fast, then a 3-day water fast. I went through 2 cycles so far. I've got 2 more to go, and I'm into the following week, and here in 2 days I will do another 3-day water fast. Well, here's the results. In June, what panicked me was not only the thought of, problems with the heart, and that's what made me start really thinking about all these things. It was, I'll read down what it was in June. Glucose level 121. A1C, HbA1c was 6.6. That's pre-diabetic and pushing type 2 diabetes. Triglycerides were pushing 200. Cholesterol was 250. My weight was 270. My blood pressure was 135/90 with drugs. So I'll come back. Now this blood test I just had on my 20th day of this, the glucose level, which was 121, came back 97. The HbA1c was 6.6, came back to 5.4. Triglycerides were 194, came down to 112. Cholesterol was 250, came down to 203. And that's 203 eating a lot of saturated fat, red meat, eggs, all of that. The LDL did go up, but that's expected. My weight was 270 when I started. In that 20 days, it dropped to 254 pounds. So it's 20 days and a drop of 16 pounds. My peak was 288, but I trained, started intermittent fasting and narrowing the eating window to prepare for this. My blood pressure, reminder, with drugs was 135/90, and now, just recently, it was 126/78 without drugs for a week. So everything is back in the normal range. I'm off metformin, I'm off all drugs in 20 days. So real food, no sugar, no seed oils, no going out. I investigated, well, when we're on the road and we're out, we have to find some places. And there is an app where you can find out where they don't use seed oils. And one of them, I believe, I could be wrong, but it's one of like this. Buffalo Wild Wings uses tallow, beef tallow. And more I see are using that. So there are some, but we're going to take off an old Lucille over here in just a few days. And we've been freeze drying a lot of stuff because Lucille's only 20 feet long. Freeze drying food and pre-prepared meals from all of this organic stuff. And then, of course, I suppose we'll have to stop in some Whole Foods or Sprouts or some health food places to get what we can along the way. because I'm going to do this for another 20 days, and who knows, just keep continuing going down that road. So this is an update. It's all good news. I mean, I'm amazed. God made our bodies to heal themselves if we just listen to Him. Take care of our gut, eat real food, and fast. Because what can happen in 72 hours is amazing, and we've talked about it. Entire immune system rebuilt, goes into autophagy, where it gets rid of all the demented, deranged cells, which causes plaque in the heart. Oh, I forgot. And my knees and everywhere there was inflammation, it's gone. I feel great. So I'm frustrated that I didn't know about this or care about it when I was 50. I'm 73, but I feel like 50 right now. So that's an update to the 40-day fast. I hope it's helpful. Thank you.